But wanted to start off with the Oregon head coaching search. Think that that's probably the biggest news coming out of the weekend is Oregon finally gets their guy. And, there was a lot of rumors about who they could have brought in there. There were different guys. You looked at Justin Wilcox, Chip Kelly, two guys who I thought made a lot of sense from a standpoint of both had ties to Oregon. Both of them, one had coached there, one had played there. Wilcox hadn't had quite the success at Cal, but there's always something about going home and feeling like you're having one of your guys. I think that would ease a lot of the alumni. Chip Kelly, I think he left on pretty good terms. And since he went to the NFL, I don't think there was quite, really any hard feelings or super hard feelings about that. And he left the program in a tremendous spot when he left with Mark Helfrich. So there was that he had going for him. And he's done a pretty good job this year at USC as well. It's not like he's struggled mightily. People could say that he kind of underachieved. I would say that he's done a pretty good job at a school where the expectation level to win, is fairly high because of the brand, but the commitment level to the winning isn't really there. And I always talk about this, the commitment versus the expectation. A lot of schools say they want to win and they expect to win, but not a lot of them are really truly financially committed to it or make the actual decisions that you think that they need to in order to win. Like they're not willing to kind of go all in and lean in to the football and athletic lifestyle. So they don't go with either one of those guys. And they go with Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator for Georgia. Now, he's 35 years old or 35 years young, very, very young coach. And obviously Rob Mullins, the AD, wanted to kind of make a splash. They didn't want to get another retread. He didn't want to bring Chip Kelly in, back. Didn't want to obviously go with Justin Wilcox or other guys that were floated around there that they were going to potentially bring in. But this is something that I talked about, in one of the previous episodes, is Oregon's a unique place, especially when you're out on the West Coast. I mean, they're one of the few schools who has massive resources. They've got Nike behind them. They really want to win. They've got a fan base that really cares about them. So they're checking a lot of these boxes that, competitive people and coaches want to make sure that you can fill if you're going to go to a school and try to be able to have some success. And so Oregon checks a lot of those. The problem is, if you go look at back, Chip Kelly left, Helfrich gets fired. Willie Taggart comes in. He's there for a year and leaves. Mario Cristobal's there for a handful of years before he ultimately goes. Now, Taggart left to go to Florida State. He wanted to get back to Florida. You could argue that Mario Cristobal left for his dream job. And so, going back to Miami, maybe he would have only left for there or potentially Alabama. But as you sit here and kind of dive in and try to take a closer look at it, they go with Dan Lanning. And by going with someone without ties to the program or really even ties to the West Coast, that's more my thing. As I talked about this before, is if you go with someone without ties to the West Coast, school that cares and really wants to win, they're going to put the resources behind it. They're going to do everything you can. But if you're not a West Coast guy, if you're not a Northwest guy, I don't think people kind of view that, or coaches view that as kind of the mecca of football. Even on the West Coast, it's not USC. And so as good as it may be, as all the resources you're going to have, it's in Eugene, Oregon. It's not like it's, in Alabama or in Florida or in, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Columbus, Ohio. It's not one of these jobs where people have looked at where they've gone for years. Austin, Texas, you name it. It's not necessarily that traditional true blue blood. And we'll get into some of the alumni getting into this, with Jeff Blake, Marcus Mariota, a bunch of guys penning their names to a letter to Dan Mullins, the AD, about the history of Oregon and about needing to get back to that. But it's not that place. And so my big worry, if I'm an Oregon fan, and obviously Dan Mullins doesn't have this concern, and maybe he thinks he can always bid his way out of it, or people will come here and fall in love. And that very well may be true. But just the recent history hasn't boded well for the Oregon Ducks. So I thought they would go back to the well of someone who they, maybe liked, and maybe isn't the hot, young, flashy, sexy hire from a Georgia or from a Bama or from wherever, but someone who wouldn't leave them, who would be able to give them that security, that sense of continuity that they haven't had there at Oregon really for about the last decade. You thought Mario Cristobal was finally getting the point where you were beginning to see it turn over and that he might be a guy that was going to be there for at least 10 years. or if he left, it wouldn't be because of his own choosing. It would be that he struggled and was asked to ultimately leave. It seemed like Oregon was getting there. And then all of a sudden, Mario Cristobal leaves. And so by bringing in Dan Lanning, did you really absolve any of those fears? He's really good defensive coach. He's done a great job. Georgia's ranked near, at, or near the top of seemingly every ranking on the defensive side of the ball. They sit there. They did lose to Alabama, but if they find a way and beat Michigan, which we'll get into that in a later date, but if they beat Michigan, they're going to be playing the national championship. So he's going to check a lot of boxes. One other box he checks, he's a great recruiter. Dan Lanning, by I believe the Rivals or one of the services, #1 recruiter in the 2022 class. Georgia's got a terrific class. In a lot of the class, the guys, the elite, super elite guys were brought in, were attributed to him. So he checks that recruiting box of everything. Now, is there a difference between recruiting at Georgia and recruiting at Oregon? Different kid. It's a different region of the country. Sure, you can bring in some national guys, but there's still going to be an element on the West Coast where it's not the Southeast. And I think recruiting is transitive. It can kind of go anywhere. If you can recruit at A, you can recruit at B, all those things. And, you can get the good players that you need to be able to get. But it is going to be a little bit different. He's going to need a strong offensive coordinator. He's 35 years old. And for a long time, you looked at Oregon, they were kind of this mecca of offense. Looked at it, Chip Kelly with what he was able to do, Helfrich, and then obviously Taggart, whatever, some struggles. Mario Cristobal, different physical running attack, but they've always had these, for the most part, offensive head coaches. And they're the ones, even go back to Mike Bellotti, they've been able to put themselves in a situation where they score a lot of points. And that was kind of their calling card. Now, a little bit different recently with Cristobal. But Dan Lanning going to need a strong OC. He's a young guy. He's going to need someone on the staff with experience too. So as he's building this out, he's going to have to make sure that he's picking some guys with some veteran presence, some experience to fill out, some game management aspects of it. Offensive coordinator run the offensive side of the ball. He's only 35. Will he call the defense? Who knows? Let's figure out how that all shakes out. This is a guy who's, coaching experience. He's from Missouri, coached at Bama, coached at Memphis. Now he did GA at Arizona State. So he does have a little bit of Pac-12 ties, but that's as close as you were getting to him coaching on Oregon. I mean, Arizona State, that's not even the full West Coast. You're not even to California yet. That's one of the newer arrivals, at least going back to 70s and 80s of, the Pac-12 going from the Pac-8 to the Pac-10 to ultimately the Pac-12. I mean, the Arizona schools were thrown in there later. So it's not even the fully traditional, West Coast. So he doesn't have these recruiting ties there. It's a little bit different for what he's going to be experiencing. Like I said, great recruiter, obviously the next big thing, but in hiring him, Dan Mullins is going outside of the box and saying, I'm not worrying about a guy leaving, that ultimately maybe if the Bama job opens up, would Dan Lanning want to go back for that? Maybe we'll worry about that and cross that bridge when we get to it. Should Kirby Smart get fired at Georgia? Is that a job that he would ultimately want to go back to? And so those are the things that they've got to try to figure out and worry about. Now, Dan Mullen's also trying to fight a two-front war now because he has some of his alums. I mentioned Jeff Blake, Marcus Mariota, a number of guys, Joey Harrington, I believe, on that list. I think there was 14 of them pen a letter talking about how Oregon isn't this blue blood program and need to get back to their history and recent history of, outworking people, grinding, having the spicy offense, all of these things. That's how they're able to have success. And so it's interesting that would come out right after the Lanning hire.